Speaking of fame, no one more famous in the world of college basketball writers than Mike DeCourcy, ladies and gentlemen. Sporting news. The man's the best. You can follow him at TSN Mike. Goat, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
I'm great, Patrick. How are you?
Man, I'm fantastic. I have to confess, though, I am ashamed of myself, but I will admit this to you. You're going to be basically father confessor for me here, because I fell into the trap this year that I always lament that everyone else falls into, and I did not follow college basketball enough until after college football was done. And I'm ashamed to admit that.
Wow, I thought you were like really, you're one of those guys I kind of rely on.
Yeah, yeah, and I rely on myself, and I let myself down, and I let you down. And I'm not.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, here's the thing. With the run LSU was making in college football, it was kind of hard to turn the topic at all to college basketball, even though LSU's leading the SEC in college basketball. So,
yes.
It's tough to make that turn. I know most people talk about college basketball sort of condensing and, it's not, now it's a one semester sport, and we don't start paying attention until midway through conference season. For those of us like me who are guilty of that because of the run LSU's been on, give us kind of some high arching, wide angle lens view of what's been going down in college basketball so far.
Well, first of all, shame on all of you.
Yes.
Let me say that.
I am ashamed.
Start there, because you're missing the best sport there is. But what I'd say is that it's been a wild year, and it's one of the reasons why it's a shame you're checking in now, because you missed a lot of craziness with the number of teams that have been upset in the top in the rankings,
mm-hmm.
the top tier, and some of the nature of the people that have done the upsetting. Stephen F. Austin, which obviously you guys are very well familiar with,
saw him
a
last
very
night.
Fine team, but and a team that could have beaten any one of 350 other teams, and nobody would have raised an eyebrow. But they won at Duke, and of course Kentucky losing at home to Evansville. So we've seen some really uncommon things happen in college basketball, and there are two reasons, in my estimation, for the way it's been unpredictable. And the first reason is that this freshman class, the class of 2019, the freshmen who are out there playing college basketball, they're not great. I mean, they're just not. There's some really good players and some guys who are helping their teams, don't get me wrong, but this country is so good at churning out incredible basketball players that when we don't have 5 or 6 or 7 guys come in a given year and really just raise your eyebrow, or as in the case of 2017, more than a dozen, then the game visibly suffers at the college level. And the other thing that has made an enormous difference is that more players are leaving college basketball early than ever before. And it used to be that if there were 2 or 3 guys who fouled for early entry and weren't selected, people would look at it like, what did you do? Why did you do that? What a foolish move. And now last year in the 2019 draft, well, actually technically not in the 2019 draft, because 44 players were not selected from the underclassmen eligible list. Never had anything like that before. I mean, literally, it was like 3 or 4 guys before. And now it's 44 players who could have been playing in college basketball this year that are either in the G League or in Europe, or maybe they're back in like social studies class trying to get a degree because none of it worked out for them.
Would you like to see, I mean, look, we know that eventually it's going to go back to if you want to go to pro out of high school, that's going to happen. But again, as I have to remind everyone seemingly every year, that's the NBA rule. That's not an NCAA rule. The NCAA doesn't care. NBA right now has it where you have to be a year in college, or your graduating class has to go a year before you're eligible for the draft. I think we all agree that's probably going to change. But would you like to see some kind of a rule where a kid can come back if he's not drafted, or is this, hey, these are big boy, this is put on your big boy pants. You made a big boy decision. Now deal with the big boy consequences.
Well, I think that the problem is that I don't think those guys want to come back. And I do think we have a rule like that now, or it's in process. I don't know exactly where it stands now, but those guys don't want to come back, and they've been convinced that it's not good for them. And I spent 15 years trying to tell people this is nonsense, and I will tell you that some of the most powerful coaches in college basketball were buying into this stuff about how they pick you apart and you can't stay in college longer because it's bad for your draft stock and all that nonsense. And look, if I'm one of those players and I could listen to an agent who might be giving me money to listen to him, or a coach who has won hundreds of games, or a basketball writer who studies it and knows a lot but doesn't have, it doesn't have the standing those guys have, I'd listen to them too. But I'm the one who was right. I'm telling you that guys who have the ability to enter through the front door, and what happens when you go through the front door is, one, they want you to succeed. They care about your success because they're invested in it. If you're coming in through the side door or back door, they don't care. They want you. If they find you and they sign you, then they want you to succeed. But they first have to find you and sign you. Mm-hmm. So it's been a bad change for college basketball and for basketball in general, that this phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it, has become the more common deal. Like I said, 44 guys happy to be in the G League or whatever. Some of those guys could have done better. And, I look at P.J. Washington, a guy like P.J. Washington or Ashton Hagans now. P.J. Washington would probably have been a second-round pick after his freshman year. He invested in himself, and he became like the 12th guy, 13th guy taken. It's just you've got to go when you're ready, not when you're ready to go.
Mike DeCourcy from Sporting News joining us. That's a great statement. Okay, so you mentioned there is a lot of parity this year. So does that mean because the freshman class isn't what some of the previous freshman classes have been, guys like Cal and Krzyzewski always seem to rely on those freshmen, do we then turn our eyes to veteran teams that maybe this is the year that one of those more veteran teams – we've had veteran teams win championships. I mean, Villanova comes to mind. They had a lot of veterans when they won. But do we turn our eyes again to some of the more veteran-laden teams and say these are the ones that are going to be the stayers, the one that have the staying power down the stretch?
Well, as you said, it's really rare for there to be a freshman-dominant team. There have only been so it's been going on in this decade. Let's start since Cal was at Kentucky. There maybe have been a total of, in 10 years, like 14 freshman-dominant teams. And 2 of them won championships. So it's not like it's a bad bet.
Right.
But this would not be the year when you would want to bet on freshmen. We saw, I would say that Memphis in its current iteration is a freshman-dominant team. They would be more dominant if they kept James Wiseman in school.
Yeah.
But it's a freshman-dominant team. And you saw some of what can happen last night if that freshman-dominant team isn't all on the same page. One of the great implosions in recent top 25 basketball. They got beat 80-40 on the road by a team that's unless they just flipped the switch last night that stays on for the rest of the year, really isn't going anywhere, Tulsa. So it's a year in which just the freshman class, if you're dependent on that, and I wrote a column about this prior to the year, even when James Wiseman was there, when people, including Penny Hardaway, were yelling because in the preseason rankings, Memphis was 14th or 20th or something like that with the number one freshman class. How come we aren't the top 5 team with our number one freshman class when if it were Duke and Kentucky, they'd be automatically up there? And I wrote right then, because this isn't a typical freshman class. The players aren't that good.
Yeah.
And you only got, and you got 2 guys in the top 15, and then the rest of your guys are 40 or 50. So you can't expect to be on that level.
And
so, you're absolutely looking at a year in which it would be really Memphis and Duke are probably the closest thing we have to that freshman dominant concept. And I think Duke could, but I wouldn't expect this team to win where others better than this one have not.
Yeah, and to Penny Hardaway's point, A, I hate preseason polls. I think you know that. I'm completely against them. But B, Penny Hardaway has no track record, A, as a college coach, and B,
right,
dealing with a freshman-laden team. I mean, we've seen what Cal does with freshman-laden teams. We've seen what Krzyzewski does with freshman-laden teams. We've never seen Penny Hardaway with this. So there's no reason that anyone should think that they're a top 5 team preseason. And preseason polls
and
are
it's
dumb.
turned out that way. Although they have the out that if Wiseman had played, things would have been different.
Right.
I mean, he is a tremendous talent. I think that his decision. I understood the frustration, but his decision, or whoever's decision it was that was made on James' behalf, because it's not always the guy that makes the decision.
Sure.
I think it was bad for him and bad for the game. I don't think you get better by not playing, and I don't think he gained anything other than he got to have a few bucks 2 months earlier.
Right, and by the way, they didn't suspend him for the year or anything. What was it, 12 games or whatever it was? It ended up being,
it was 12 games,
yeah.
And it would have been 9 if the university hadn't messed up their response to the initial request to or I don't know if you call it a request, but notification that it would be wise to sit him down for a while.
Yeah.
They mishandled that, so it became 12. But he was supposed to play, I think, a week ago, 10 days ago, and did not, and chose to go professional. And I think it was, I do not think in any way, shape, or form he bettered himself by doing that.
Yeah, talking to Mike DeCourcy from Sporting News. All right, Mike, what do we make of Kansas State? Really ugly scenario at the end. Kansas State player steals the ball. D'Souza goes and blocks him, stands over him. That's taken issue with. And then all of a sudden it turns into a WWE event. 12-game suspension for D'Souza, and then some other guys have gotten some suspension on either side. Is this an isolated incident, or is this something that we should worry about that could become a trend with especially these rivalry games?
No, we've had the no fighting rules, for lack of a better term, since around 87 or 88. I think it was 88 after Georgetown and Pitt fought. The rules committee put in the no fighting rules that basically you're suspended for the next game if you're involved in a fight. If you come off the bench to get involved in a fight, you're suspended automatically. So we've had those rules for now 30-plus years. And how many real bad fights have we had? We had this one. We had Cincinnati Xavier. I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I was at the Cincinnati Xavier deal. That was 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's a long time. So, I don't worry about that becoming a trend. I did think, I thought that the narrative, and it was, in terms of the narrative, I think it was Silvio's fault for picking up the stool, because once he did that,
right,
like everything went there. And so, but look, Silvio, the guy from Kansas State made an unsportsmanlike play to steal the ball and go down and try to lay it in or dunk it. That was unsportsmanlike. The Silvio, by blocking the shot, not that, but standing over him, taunting him, made an unsportsmanlike play. But there are unsportsmanlike plays in every sport every night that are dealt with by the officials or by the respective teams themselves, getting each other's faces and jawing at each other, and then it goes away every night. But we don't have to have this every night. And it happened because the Kansas State players came off the bench and took exception to, which they had no right to do. I will tell you that on the same night, Purdue and Illinois played a game, and one of the players from Illinois stepped on the chest of a prone Purdue player, the Christian Laettner style, let's call it, and no one from Purdue's bench came running off the bench because their player had been affronted that way. They did the refs looked at the tape. They said, "You're gone." He was out for the rest of the game, and they moved on, and that was it. That's how it's done. You don't have to this nonsense where they took exception, and honestly, they got off easy because of the fact of what D'Souza did once the brawl began. And I'm not holding Bruce Weber responsible for that because, he was not anywhere near his bench at that point. The ball was stolen. He wasn't, he was like in his mind, the game was over.
Yeah,
the buzzer
he's
sound.
walking to go shake hands.
He's actually literally standing at midcourt waiting for Bill to come down, and has no idea that his team has left the bench. So I don't blame him for that, but I do think that the Kansas State players, both from a punishment standpoint and from a narrative standpoint, got off easy here, because it was the same thing with Mason Rudolph when everybody tried to make the getting hit in the head with a helmet thing about what he did. Look, guys tussle all the time. In a hockey game, they do it 15 times a night. Guys tussle or they jaw at each other. But that doesn't give you license to go then and swing a helmet at somebody's head. Just as it doesn't give you license to leave the bench and pursue Silvio De Sousa in the way that he was.
Mike DeCourcy from Sporting News. Did you watch any of Zion last night?
I honestly did not. I had 15 college hoops games to worry about.
Wednesday, Thursday are huge college basketball nights. That's when most of your midweek conference games are. So it's hard to pull away from it. But I am curious. Do you sort of keep track of these guys? My number one thing I always go back to is Karl Anthony Towns, who didn't basically play outside of about 10 feet from the basket when he was at Kentucky. And suddenly he's a three-point shooter, and he's a stretch four all over the floor when he gets to the NBA, to the Timberwolves. Do you follow these guys and kind of their progress as they make their way into the NBA? Some of the guys that you really enjoyed following or keeping up with in college?
Yeah, especially the ones I liked, guys that I did appreciate. And, I actually saw Carl when he was in 10th grade, and he could shoot then. And I did a column about him. It was when he was with the Dominican national team. They played an exhibition game 10 minutes from my house. And I did a column that said he could be like, that his game was modeled after Dirk's. When he went to Kentucky and played in the post all that time, I was like, wow, they turned him into a post guy. Good for them. I didn't think he had that. So I knew that that what you're seeing now was in there more than I knew that he could do what he did at Kentucky. I do enjoy seeing guys that I've interacted with and followed do well or make it. There are guys that I didn't enjoy as much,
right?
But there are guys in the league that I know fairly well. I don't get to see him that much, but I knew Chris Paul really well when he was a high school player, early college player, and I see him now, and I think he still knows who I am enough to say hello. And Carmelo Anthony was always wonderful. Carmelo Anthony was the most amazing young man in terms of being aware of who he's dealing with. I did a column on him. He spent one day at the ABCD camp when he was a senior to be in high school because he had to go to summer school at Oak Hill to get ready for that. And I did a one-on-one interview with him, and I did a column on him for the internet. And then I saw him 6 months later at a high school tournament in New Jersey, in Trenton, New Jersey. I went with Dave Tellep, who's now with the Spurs. And I saw Carmelo, and he came up to me and said, "Hello, Mr. DeCourcy." I'm like, whoa, this guy's on a different level for most of the guys I deal with.
Final question for you, Mike, and obviously since we're in LSU country at down in Louisiana, I have to ask you, is it a little bit strange that the team atop the SEC is not ranked right now?
Yeah, I think it's a little strange. I think they've earned it, for one. I'll be honest with you. If you hadn't told me, I wouldn't know because I don't pay attention to the polls at all.
Nobody. Literally, I just looked it up a second ago to know that that actually was the case.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known. I think they're in the top 20 in the net. The last I looked, they were in that ballpark.
Right.
I care more about that and Ken Palm than I do about the polls. They're playing really well, very well, and I think that in a league that is not what it had been the last 2-3 years. They were in a really good spot. This is a little bit of a retrenchment year. But they're still very good teams throughout the league. Kentucky's very good. Auburn's very good. Florida's coming on. And then, of course, the Tigers beat them by 2 the other night, I think.
Yeah.
Should have
gone to overtime, by the way, on a Mike White, whose his end zone in out of bounds plays are legendary. and he literally got a wide open layup. It was just 2/10 of a second on the clock, and the kid still had the ball in his hands as the buzzer went off, even though he made the layup that would have tied it and sent it to overtime.
Yeah, so they're doing great, and it's going to be interesting to see. You know, I'm doing mock brackets for Fox now, and you know, and I've had, you know, I think I went with them from, it might have been double digits when I started 2-3 weeks ago, and now they're cracking the top 4. So really, really an ascended team this year. Not an ascended program; they've already been there, but they're an ascended team because they didn't start great.
Yeah. Well, as always, Mike, you're the best. I kept you much too long today, but we had to get caught back up on college basketball because, again, I'm ashamed of myself, and I'm starting my I mean, look, I'm always, you know, I know the Southland, and I know what's going on with Northwestern State and that, but nationally I'm behind, and so I appreciate you coming on and getting us caught back up, man. I really do.
Well, as long as you're keeping up with your guys, you know, I forgive you.
Oh, yeah. No, I know everything about the Southland. If you need Southland information, you come to me. If you need information about the ACC, I'm not your guy. So just
that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll catch up.
All right, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Patrick.
All right, Mike DeCourcy, the GOAT.